who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, April the 7th. Your readers today are Lori and
Alita.
Let's look at the weather, and it is not rain. Yay! Oh, but it's snow. A couple of snow showers during the morning, otherwise colder with clouds giving way to some sun today, with a high 32. Clear tonight, low of 22. Tomorrow, 55 for a high.
Woo-hoo.
Thursday, sun and areas of high clouds in the morning, then mostly cloudy in the afternoon. Can you believe it? A high of 66. That's
oh
66,
my goodness,
people.
that's fantastic.
If you want to be warm, though, go to Brooksville, Florida, 87, which doesn't seem terribly warm, but it's warm.
Yeah.
Or you can go to Tioga, North Dakota, 10 degrees if you still want to be cold. And that's for you skiers. I'm sad to say the ski conditions show that in all places there are 0 trails available. That's a good thing. It's spring, people. Let's do roller skating or something. Sunsets tonight at 7:48 p.m. And if you're looking at going out on the lake, Erie has a northwest wind, 10 to 20 knots, seas at 2 feet or less, visibility less than 2 miles at times in the morning with snow showers because the temperature of the water is 37.
All right. And the Vatican takes a fine-tooth comb to decisions by U.S. bishops that merge parishes and close churches. Robert Antonini knows he might not be popular with the leadership of the Catholic Diocese of Allentown, PA. Antonini and other Catholics fought the diocese's decision to close the diocese's Mary Queen of Peace Church in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, beginning in 2008. 18 years later, the church is still standing and since October, open again thanks to their persistence. I took them on 2 times and won 2 times, Antonini, who runs a small business repairing radiators. They're all canon law experts, and I'm just a third-rate mechanic. Across the U.S., including the Diocese of Buffalo, regular Catholics are going toe-to-toe with bishops who want to merge parishes and close churches. Bishops often cite dwindling church attendance and finances along with a growing shortage of priests as reasons to pare down. In the Buffalo Diocese, for example, Bishop Fisher nearly 2 years ago announced the need to retrench, saying he had to address the reality that 3 out of 5 parishes were running operating deficits and that the 70 priests expected to be available in 2030 could not cover the 196 worship sites still open at the time in 8 western New York counties. But parishioners believe such moves hasten the demise of Catholicism in areas of the country that were once strongholds of the faith. Many of them, like Antonini, are turning to the Vatican to intervene and stop the mergers and closures. And the Vatican seems to be paying close attention. Attorney Brody Hale calls it a sea change from a couple of decades ago when he first started delving into the Catholic Church's canon laws that govern how bishops may merge parishes and close churches and allow Catholics to appeal those decisions. Hale practices secular law in Massachusetts. He is not a canon lawyer, but he has become an expert on canon law as it pertains to mergers and closures. He co-founded Save Rome of the West, a nonprofit that helps parishioners around the country who are trying to keep their churches open. He is currently working on 22 cases across the country, he said. It's without question that these cases are being examined, and generally speaking, actions of dioceses are being gone over with a more fine-tooth comb, in my opinion, than was the case 20 years ago, he said. Under canon law, a bishop must have just cause to merge or close a parish, and prior to a couple of years ago, it was rare to see the Vatican reverse any decisions by bishops over a parish merger. Bishops must have grave cause to close a church and allow for it to be used for non-sacred purposes, allowing for a greater likelihood that a parishioner could win an appeal of a church closing, Hale said. Parishes are far harder to save than churches, he said. A merger of parishes is usually a prelude to a church closing later on, even if both worship sites in the merger initially stayed open, he added. Some parishioners recently have succeeded in keeping their parishes intact. The Vatican, since 2024, has reversed mergers in the Archdiocese of St. Louis and the Diocese of Joliet in Illinois, Hale said. Appeals are ongoing in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. And in the Buffalo Diocese, the Vatican's Dicastery for Clergy overruled Fisher's decree for parish mergers in 4 instances, with several merger appeals yet to be decided. The Dicastery also ruled earlier this year against Fisher's plan to shutter and sell St. Mary's Church in East Arcade. Parishioners have sought Vatican intervention on 34 closings and merging decrees issued by Fisher, according to Buffalo Diocese officials. 11 Vatican rulings so far have upheld Fisher's decree. The Dicastery has yet to decide on 18 cases. Hale was part of the effort to keep open St. Mary's, which has been operating as a secondary worship site for nearly 2 decades, following the 2007 merger of St. Mary Parish with Saints Peter and Paul Parish in Arcade. He was involved with one other recent appeal in which the Vatican sided with the Buffalo Diocese and has kept a close eye on other cases here. He said he was surprised by the Dicastery's deep examination of them. The case of St. John Canty Church on the east side was especially noteworthy, he said. Parishioners there submitted a request for recourse months after receiving a closure decree, well past the 10-day deadline by which an appeal must be filed with the Vatican. Hale declined to assist the St. John Canty parishioners because the Vatican, to his knowledge, had not previously accepted any appeal request that arrived outside the window, and he saw no hope for the cause. But the Vatican did take the St. John Canty appeal, which is still being examined. It is unprecedented, Hale said. That tells me that the Vatican is really giving Buffalo a good going over. The Reverend Brian Zelenensky leads a diocese effort known as Road to Renewal that began in 2020 to get parishes accustomed to working more closely together and providing ministries and sacraments and sharing priests. The renewal morphed in 2024 into a massive restructuring that envisioned dozens of churches closures and a reduction by half of the 160 parishes across 8 counties of the diocese. The mergers and closures were to be completed by the summer of 2025. The Diocese of Buffalo has an infrastructure that was built for a time when our population was so much greater and our Catholic percentage of population was so much higher, said Zelenensky, Diocese Vicar for Renewal and Development. The Vatican appeals may have slowed things down, but Zelenensky maintained that the work of renewal continues beyond closures and mergers. I'm not disappointed with where we're at all, he said. We've made great progress, and I'm happy about that. We've had some struggles, too. Zelenensky said diocese officials understood from the start of the parish restructuring effort that some parishioners might seek Vatican intervention, as is their right as Catholics. Still, most parishioners, he added, are not part of appeals and did everything we wanted. They understand what renewal is about. They're understanding it's a strong community. Julie Monheim fears the effort to renew parishes has only weakened them. The longtime parishioner of Sacred Heart Church in Bowmansville was relieved that the Dicastery recently overturned Fisher's decree merging her parish with Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Harris Hill. But she said diocese officials have put unrealistic expectations on Sacred Heart parishioners to grow the parish and its ministries and improve its finances while giving no assurances that it will remain open. It's very difficult to do all that when they have this watch list hanging over our heads, and they're putting pressure on parishioners. Yet there's no stability, no promise they're not going to turn around and do this again next year, she said. She accused diocese leaders of paying greater attention to worldly things than to godly things. The appeal has further complicated an already complex Chapter 11 bankruptcy process, in which the diocese has committed to a roughly $325 million settlement in principle with nearly 900 sex abuse claimants. The deal will require parishes to collectively contribute $75 million from their savings and $30 million from the proceeds of excess parish property sales. The plan will include liability releases for contributing parishes so that they can't be sued anymore for past sex abuse cases. Vatican appeals, though, are holding up some potential sales, and the Dicastery for Clergy also has written to several parishioners to say that it will examine their recourse request, objecting to the use of parish funds toward the abuse settlement. There is no indication of how long that could take or what Fisher would need to do to reconcile the settlement terms with canon law. Lori?
And Artemis II breaks Apollo 13's record for distance traveled by humanity. Houston, with the moon filling their windows, the Artemis II astronauts kicked off their lunar flyby Monday, taking in magnificent views of the far side never before witnessed, while setting a new distance record for humanity. The 6-hour flyby is the highlight of NASA's first return to the moon since the Apollo era, with 3 Americans and 1 Canadian, a step toward landing blueprints near the moon's south pole in just 2 years. First came a prize, a bragging rights for Artemis II. Less than an hour before kicking off the fly-around and intense lunar observations, the 4 astronauts surpassed the distance record of 248,655 miles, set by Apollo 13 back in April of 1970. They kept going, hurtling ever farther from the Earth. Before it was all over, Mission Control expected Artemis II to beat the old record by more than 4,100 miles. It is blowing my mind what you can see with the naked eye from the moon right now. It is just unbelievable, Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen radioed ahead of the flyby. He challenged this generation and the next to make sure this record is not long-lived. Moments after breaking Apollo 13's record, the astronauts asked permission to name 2 fresh lunar craters already observed. They proposed Integrity, their capsule's name, and Carol, in honor of Commander Reed Wiseman's wife, who died of cancer in 2020. Wiseman wept as Hansen put in the request to Mission Control, and all 4 astronauts embraced in tears. Such a majestic view out here, Wiseman radioed once he regained his composure and started picture taking. The astronauts called down that they managed to capture the moon and Earth in the same shot and provided a running commentary to scientists back in Houston on what they were seeing. The astronauts started the momentous day with the voice of Apollo 13 Commander Jim Lovell, who recorded a wake-up message just 2 months before his death last August. "Welcome to my old neighborhood," said Lovell, who also flew on Apollo 8, humanity's first lunar visit. "It's a historic day, and I know how busy you'll be, but don't forget to enjoy the view." They took up with them the Apollo 8 silk patch that accompanied Lovell to the moon and showed it off as the crucial flyby approached. "It's just a real honor to have that on board with us," said Wiseman. "Let's go and have a great day." Artemis II is using the same maneuver that Apollo 13 did after its Houston "We've had a problem" oxygen tank explosion wiped out any hope of a moon landing. Known as a free return lunar trajectory, this no stopping to land route takes advantage of Earth and the moon's gravity, reducing the need for fuel. It's a celestial figure 8 that will put the astronauts on course for home once they emerge from behind the moon on Monday evening. Wiseman, Hansen, pilot Victor Glover, and Christina Cook were on track to pass as close as 4,070 miles to the moon as their Orion capsule whips past it, hangs a U-turn, and then heads back toward Earth. It will take them 4 days to get back, with a splashdown in the Pacific concluding their test flight on Friday. Their expected speed at closest approach to the moon, 3,139 miles per hour. Wiseman and his crew spent years studying lunar geography to prepare for the big event, adding solar eclipses to their repertoire during the past few weeks. By launching last Wednesday, they ensured themselves of a total solar eclipse from their vantage point behind the moon, courtesy of the Cosmos. Topping their science target list, Oriental Basin, a sprawling impact basin with 3 concentric rings, the outermost of which stretches nearly 600 miles across. Other sightseeing goals, the Apollo 12 and 14 landing sites from 1969 and 71 respectively, as well as fringes of the South Polar region, the preferred locale for future touchdowns. Farther afield, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Saturn, not to mention Earth, will be visible. Their moon mentor, NASA geologist Kelsey Young, expects thousands of pictures. People all over the world connect with the moon. "This is something that every single person on this planet can understand and connect with," she said on the eve of the flyby, wearing eclipse earrings. Artemis II is NASA's first astronaut moonshot since Apollo 17 back in 1972. It sets the stage for next year's Artemis 3, which will see another Orion crew practice docking with lunar landers in orbit around the Earth. The culminating moon landing by 2 astronauts near the moon's south pole will follow on Artemis 4, and that will be in 2028. While Artemis 2 may be taking Apollo 13's path, it is most reminiscent of Apollo 8 and humanity's first lunar visitors who orbited the moon on Christmas Eve in 1968 and read from the book of Genesis. Glover said flying to the moon during Christianity's Holy Week brought home for him the beauty of creation. Earth is an oasis amid a whole bunch of nothing. This thing we call the universe, where humanity exists as one, he observed over the weekend. This is an opportunity for us to remember where we are, who we are, and that we are the same thing, and that we've got to get through this together, Glover said, clasping hands with his crewmates.
Amen, brother. And you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time is 16 minutes past the hour. And the Attorney General's office is reviewing Save the Michaels as nonprofit seeks to transfer ownership of New Fame program. Save the Michaels of the World Incorporated appears to be winding down its remaining operations after state and county agencies previously pulled funding for the addictions service provider due to concerns over how the Buffalo nonprofit was managing its finances. A call to Save the Michaels on Monday morning came with an automated message directing callers to contact CEO Jessica Goff or Board President George Maziarz. While Maziarz did not respond to a message, Goff answered the phone and told a reporter, "I'm sorry, I can't speak to you or comment at this time." The nonprofit's Facebook page, which has been posting updates, also has been removed. While Save the Michaels' location in Lockport has been closed for more than a month, the nonprofit is seeking to transfer ownership of its New Fame House of Hope program to the Recovery Center of Niagara, according to an application received by the state Saturday. The House of Hope program, which is a 12-bed male residential reintegration program, is already located in the Recovery Center of Niagara building, and services will remain unchanged according to the application. A spokesperson for the State Office of Addiction Services and Supports confirmed Monday that the application is now under review. But Save the Michaels' troubles might not be over. The State Attorney's General Office confirmed Monday that its Charities Bureau is reviewing the situation at the nonprofit. Investigative Post first reported Friday that Save the Michaels ceased operations and has been selling assets to pay its remaining employees. Save the Michaels faced nearly impossible odds to survive once Oasis decided to cease millions of dollars in funding for the nonprofit after the state agency had previously identified serious fiscal and operational challenges at Save the Michaels that informed ongoing oversight and planning discussions. The 2 multi-year contracts that were discontinued as of the 29th of March were worth more than $5 million and called for providing chemical dependency services and non-medical transportation. Erie County had also ended its relationship with Save the Michaels. Most recently, Sarah Bonk, Commissioner of the Erie County Department of Mental Health, sent a letter to Goff on the 6th of March informing Save the Michaels that the county was terminating its contract with the provider effective at the end of the day on the 6th of April, according to a copy of the letter the county shared Monday with the Buffalo News. The letter advised that any outstanding reimbursement requests be submitted to the Department of Mental Health by the 6th of April. Bonk reached out again to Goff in an email sent Wednesday morning to ask if Save the Michaels planned to submit any documentation related to opioid settlement funding dollars for the first few weeks of 2026, as well as anything left over from 2025. Goff replied 8 minutes later, according to the county, and said, "Hello, nothing further will be sent. Thank you." One of the key documents behind the decisions made by Oasis in Erie County was an Oasis audit finalized in 2024 that found fiscal mismanagement at Save the Michaels. Among the audit's claims, advances totaling nearly $40,000 were made from the organization to longtime CEO Avi Israel in 2021 and 2022 without prior board approval. Prior approval requirements were not being followed out for out-of-state travel, and the board approved a $25,000 raise for Israel in January of 2024 without Oasis regional office support or approval as required for Oasis-funded providers. Israel, who founded Save the Michaels in 2011 with his wife Julie Israel, in late December posted on Facebook that he would retire on the 1st of January. Goff, who joined Save the Michaels in 2019 as an administrative assistant and then advanced into leadership roles, was elevated into the role of CEO after Israel's resignation. On the 20th of March, Save the Michaels, as it was attempting to appeal Oasis's decision to pull its funding, announced on Facebook that Avi Israel was no longer serving on its board of directors. The Post thanked him for his leadership and profound commitment and said Save the Michaels was working to navigate a period of significant transition to try to ensure its services were maintained in the community. But in his post on March 22nd, Avi Israel said he learned on social media that he was off the board. Unfortunately, the new leadership decided I was in the way and together with the board pushed me out even though I had a 3-year agreed upon work contract to mentor the incoming leadership, he wrote on Facebook. This is a sad situation on how this all unfolded. In addition to the 2 canceled contracts with Oasis that were scheduled to run through the end of 28 and 29, Save the Michaels had a multi-year $750,000 contract for a new syringe exchange program, of which $183,000 had already been spent with the state health department that runs through June 30th, 2028, according to Open Book New York. Syringe exchange programs in New York offer services including opiate overdose prevention, hepatitis C treatment, access to harm reduction services, and more rapid access to buprenorphine treatment for opioid use disorder, Health Department spokesman Cadence Aquaviva said on Monday. The department is aware of the closure of Save the Michaels of the World Lockport location and is taking action to ensure access to support service previously offered by the organization. The department will not accept vouchers for reimbursement from Save the Michaels for services provided after the date of their closure. Lori?
And Jackie Calms has an opinion. Given the news, why does the White House demolition even matter? Even if I hadn't been privileged over the years to enter the White House countless times, I'd have been upset to tears last October by the sudden sight of excavators' claws ripping the 123-year-old East Wing to shreds, and by the knowledge that President Trump planned a ballroom 3 times larger in its place. The People's House, by its simple elegance, a symbol of democratic republic, was to be transformed by the tacky tacking on of a Mad King's vanity project. For 5 months since, I've stewed as Trump proceeded with his planned desecration. He purged 2 review boards to stack them with yes folks. He expanded those plans so that the ballroom's price tag doubled to $400 million. Repeatedly, he dined with donors and corporate moguls, picking up the ballroom tab, each with business before a federal government that he's turned into a pay-to-play racket. And all without consulting Congress, which since 1790 had been in charge of authorizing and funding construction of and at the White House. But I'd also chastise myself. The White House is just a building, I'd think. And in the time since Trump's teardown, he's torn apart the lives of undocumented migrants and citizens alike, sending masked, armed, unqualified agents into American cities, beating and killing protesters and deporting law-abiding longtime residents without due process. He's torn up ancient alliances and campaign promises, starting a war that is ravaging the Middle East, costing Americans blood and treasure as well as foreigners. Against this backdrop, what's a building? More than a building, I've decided when we're talking about the White House. In a nation founded on ideals, after throwing off a king, the idea of a people's house that is not palatial is one worth protecting. Also worth defending is the democratic process by which that house had previously been built and changed, until now. Each time that there were alteration, various repairs, especially after the British torched the White House during the War of 1812, expansions as well as the addition of the East and West Wings in the early 20th century, and modernizations, most extensively after engineers found major structural damage in the Truman years, Congress authorized, funded, and oversaw the work as the law and the Constitution provide. Trump's solicitation of private donations means he doesn't have to hit up the taxpayers, yet it adds the stench of corruption wafting about. It adds to the stench of corruption wafting about. Having covered past administrations and having attended a state dinner in a tent on the South Lawn, I can attest that presidents probably need a larger ballroom, but not one that's much larger than the entire presidential residence. Also, as a statement of national priorities, Trump's ballroom obsession is obscene at a time of war and economic pain. On a recent night aboard Air Force One, he interrupted reporters' questions about what's ahead in Iran to regale them for a full 5 minutes on camera about 6 poster board drawings he'd just gotten from his architect. "I'm so busy that I don't have time to do this," Trump told the reporters. "I'm fighting wars and other things." But he does it anyway. When it comes to the ballroom, Trump is not reading the room, or apparently the polls and public petitions against his pet project. And here's a last reason to oppose without apologies Trump's bulldozing his way into a ginormous ballroom. The fight for the symbolic and architectural integrity of the White House is of a piece with the broader fight against the lawless, self-aggrandizing impunity with which Trump approaches everything: war, federal spending, tariffs, immigration, crackdowns, voting rights, you name it. I was still thinking through whether the intensity of my outrage about what's happening at the White House construction site was justified when, last Tuesday, a Republican-appointed federal judge gave resounding reassurance. The President of the United States is the steward of the White House for future generations of first families. He's not, however, the owner of the White House. That's how Federal District Judge Richard J. Leon opened his 35-page ruling ordering construction to stop while a lawsuit against the project by the National Trust for Historic Preservation proceeds. Just in time, Trump wanted above-ground work to start this month. The president's lawyers have said they will appeal, and Leon has suggested the case likely will reach the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, on Thursday, the second of the 2 Trump-stacked review boards, the National Capital Planning Commission, blessed his ballroom design. But, as Leon wrote, the president's sham review process and construction plans fly in the face of 3 clauses of the Constitution and federal laws giving Congress authority over federal buildings, and specifically those in Washington. In an opinion replete with exclamation marks reflecting the judge's oft-expressed frustration with administration's lawyers' absurd arguments over the past months, he wrote that no law comes close to empowering Trump to raise the East Wing and build a ballroom. And contrary to Trump and his toadies' claims that the president isn't doing anything that hasn't been done before, Leon held, this clearly is not how Congress and former presidents have managed the White House for centuries, and this court will not be the first to hold that Congress has ceded its powers in such a significant fashion. Such good stuff. Leon gets the last word. Congress is the collective voice of the American people in our system of government. After all, the White House does not belong to any one man, not even a president.
And just a reminder, you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time is 28 minutes past the hour. And in our editorial cartoon from Michael Ramirez is a picture of a classic alien with the big head and the big eyes and the real long, thin fingers. And they are on the surface of the moon. You can see the flag in the background and the Earth way off in the distance. Mm-hmm. And one of the aliens is holding a cell phone. And they say to each other, orbiting the moon, next they'll be claiming birthright citizenship. That's funny. I like it. Mm-hmm. All right. And from our Buffalo News, a basic need editorial. Public transit ridership is upstate and western New York has been seeing double-digit increases in recent years as the cost of owning and fueling a vehicle continues to rise. That's why the push for increased state operating aid deserves close attention here at home. It's why representatives of upstate transit systems traveled last week to Albany and asked state leaders for a 15% increase in operating aid in the state budget. Miguel Velasquez, president of the New York Transit Association, was among those recently making the case to state leaders for the operating aid increase in the state budget. These advocates say the $75.8 million request is critical for affordability, jobs, and the future of their service. They also contend that the non-MTA funding increase would lead to a total of $1.09 billion in state aid, and NYPTA represents more than 100 transit systems. Velasquez Velasquez says that the absence of adequate funding would mean we cannot maintain current service levels, let alone expand and improve service to meet growing community demands. But as reported by Albany Bureau Chief Robert Gavin, transit systems and the riding public may have to wait it out as the state budget process once again blows past its April 1st deadline. There is also the question of fairness between downstate and upstate. In an emailed statement to the news, the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority said the increase would help address inflation, like the rising cost of fuel, power, and labor. It would also help the Transit Authority fund services like paratransit, which has grown by 10% this year. In general, the NFTA, like the other upstate agencies, is looking for equity when it comes to funding to support our essential services. In the last 15 years, state transit operating assistance support for downstate systems has grown 30% faster than support for upstate systems. Officials added, in the face of rising costs, NFTA and its peer agencies are seeking the legislature to increase funding 15% to meet rising costs. The much needed and appreciated STOA funding, NFTA officials added, would be used to run day-to-day operations on the bus, rail, and paratransit. As an example, while the NFTA has received a significant capital grant to build out the new Bailey BRT system service, those grants do not include ongoing operating assistance. STOA will contribute to the service's operations, which will cost approximately $3.8 million per year. It matters in Western New York, where Niagara Frontier Transportation Authorities operate buses, rail, and paratransit services that thousands rely on every day. In a recent Another Voice, Assemblymember Karen McMahon and John Rivera advocated for the 15% increase in state transit operating assistance to upstate non-MTA systems, stating that bus riders in their districts complain of declining frequency of service and important routes that have been eliminated in recent years. McMahon and Rivera stressed that 30% of Buffalo residents do not own a car and rely on public transportation. Many jobs are inaccessible to public transit, and, as mentioned earlier, the cost of a car, new or used, can be out of reach. State leaders should approve the requested 15% increase in operating aid in the state budget to ensure upstate and Western New Yorkers can continue to rely on public transit.
And in my view, Lori Duvall Jackson appreciates the offerings of her public library because the library is an antidote to gloomy weather. March in Buffalo, otherwise known as 50 Shades of Gray, is a dreary, rainy month when I find myself spending more time than usual at the library. This is a lifelong habit that began early, with visits to the Brighton Public Library in the town of Tonawanda. It was less than a mile from my house, and I only had to cross one street and some fields to get there. We had free-range childhoods then, and at some early point my mother deemed it safe for me to go alone. I spent hours perusing the children's section. Some books I read sitting at the oak tables and chairs dotting the library. When I returned some years ago to give a presentation, I was amazed to discover the original furnishings were still there. As I slid into one of those polished chairs, I wondered if I had sat there decades ago. It's now the Brighton Place Library, an independent entity. There's a one-time nominal fee that entitles use of the library and its holdings to individuals, a bargain at twice that price. Having good reading skills, I quickly outgrew the books for children. I remember the first book I took out in the young adult section was S.E. Hinton's classic, The Outsiders. It was newly published, and it would be decades before I discovered the author was a woman who used her initials because it made the book more marketable. The tale of two warring teenage factions was a big find for a youngster, and I promptly decided to name any future son Pony Boy after the main character. Thankfully, that notion faded over time. As proof that my memory isn't completely shot, I can still recall facts gleaned from the library's classic biography series, which included Francis Marion's Swamp Fox and Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. I read the series one at a time, and all these decades later can still remember things I learned from them. I also remember how checking out a book involved interaction with an actual librarian. And the due date was stamped on a special card that fit into a small pocket glued into the back of the book. Now, much has changed since then. Nowadays, our Buffalo and Erie County Public Library system enables me to check the catalog online. No more card catalogs. Request a book, a CD, a journal to be delivered to my local branch. Be notified via email when it's available for pickup, and check it out electronically without ever needing to see a human being. Back in the mists of time, silence was a hallmark of the library spaces. Shh! That certainly changed. During a recent visit, there were children running through the stacks and yelling, and I was relieved to see "Use Your Library Voice" sign when I returned. It's no surprise my first truly adult job was at a college library. There were study rooms for group meetings, a room to watch films available at the desk, and no food or drink was allowed. The staff took turns policing for this, but now the library has its own Tim Hortons. If books aren't your thing, you can check out items from electronics to seeds to movies. You can check out seeds? Okay. Give your local library a visit and take your children. You never know what might inspire them.
And in another voice submitted by Anshul Gupta, is a policy and research director at New Yorkers for Clean Power. Hochul must not dismantle New York's climate law. And I might add that another author is Lynn Saxton. At a recent Erie County rally, Governor Kathy Hochul spoke about her proposal to dismantle New York's climate law in the state budget. Her characterization of her proposal was misleading and the rationale untenable. The governor stated that all she wants is a longer runway, implying that she needs more time to achieve the law's targets by reducing climate pollution. But in her actual proposal, she doesn't even want to start taxiing until 2031. New York's climate law requires the state to roll out regulations for reducing climate pollution in 2024. But the Hochul administration has been withholding the regulations in defiance of the law, while our energy bills have continued climbing. Now the governor is using affordability as a pretext for seeking to reset the date to 2031 from 2024. The governor has conceded that rising energy costs have nothing to do with the climate law. That would be a stupid thing to say, she noted, because it's not in effect yet. Well, we also know what else is stupid: doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Extending the status quo only raises costs for the New Yorkers. Unchecked growth of fossil fuel until 2031 will only make it harder and costlier to address the problem later and deprive the state of billions of dollars in funding for energy affordability and modernizing our energy infrastructure. The governor is also seeking to rewrite the rules for measuring climate pollution to discount the harms from fracked methane gas and make the state's compliance with the climate law look better without actually reducing pollution. In the governor's preferred metaphor, she wants to log hundreds of flight hours without the plane ever leaving the departure gate. The governor has been the target of intense lobbying by fossil fuel interests, but the legislature must stay strong and hold the line against a weakening of the climate law. The governor has lamented that the environmental community doesn't understand where her heart is. We may not know where the heart is, but if the soul is sold to the fossil fuel industry in the final state budget, everyone will understand that.
And David Mastio says Bondi was the best AG we'll see under Trump. It was obvious what kind of official Attorney General Pam Bondi would be in the second Trump administration, long before she joined it and long before Donald Trump came down the golden escalator. Bondi took thousands in Trump campaign donations in 2013 as Florida's Attorney General and shut down an investigation of Trump University, then accused of defrauding dozens of the state's residents. Someone with the lowest possible opinion of the former Trump defense counsel wouldn't have been disappointed once she became Trump's third Senate-approved AG. She bent and broke the law while abandoning the norm of Department of Justice independence from the White House politics. Such abject obsequiousness wasn't enough for Trump, who fired her Thursday. When Trump wanted the Epstein files splashed across America's front pages, Bondi promised to release them. When Trump changed his mind after learning of unflattering revelations about himself in the FBI documents, Bondi loyally conspired to hide Trump's role. Her DOJ broke the law so obviously that even Republicans on the wildly partisan House Judiciary Committee noticed. Her Justice Department also broke the law in deporting people despite valid and clear judicial orders not to, and lied to dozens of federal judges in the process of pursuing Trump's mass deportation agenda. She and Trump violated the law in handpicking prosecutors to file politically motivated criminal charges against a Democratic New York Attorney General and a Republican former FBI chief. Judges slapped that abuse down. Her time at the DOJ included the purge of any FBI agents and prosecutors who had worked on the prosecution of Trump under the previous Democratic administration, which only took up the cases against the then former president after months of trying very hard to avoid it. Thousands of professionals involved, along with civil rights, environmental, and other professional staffers from politically disfavored departments, left. She did not act swiftly to replace them. Crime went down under her tenure, as Trump observed, but that was only the contribution of the trend under Joe Biden, which Trump denies. Trump was frustrated with Bondi because even as she loyally tried to cover up his involvement with Epstein, facts and documents kept leaking out to the press and to congressional Democrats. She wasn't breaking the law, she was breaking the law, but not enough breaking for Trump. He was also frustrated by Bondi's failure to find a workaround for the grand juries and judges who kept rejecting Trump's efforts to take revenge on his enemies from the Biden years. Again, she broke the law in making illegal appointments to carry out the prosecutions, but she wouldn't override the safeguards in the justice system. The firing of Bondi is a message to all Trump's other political appointees, Senate confirmed or not. No amount of bowing to the dear leader is enough. No shredding of your principles is enough. No amount of law-breaking is enough. No amount of humiliation is enough. If there is one thing I know after a year of Trump administration of justice, is that the next Attorney General will be worse. That's what it will read on Bondi's political headstone. Here lies the career of Donald Trump's best second-term Attorney General.
And Gen Z revolts show that toppling leaders is just the start. South Asia has had 3 youth-led revolts and 3 changes of government, and still has 3 countries with problems that haven't changed a bit. In February, Bangladesh gave Tariq Rahman, exiled in London for 17 years, a sweeping mandate. And in early March, Nepalese voted overwhelmingly for Bela Shah, previously a rapper and mayor of Kathmandu. Meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, the former Marxist-Leninist Anura Dissanayake is 18 months into his tenure and is facing multiple crises, including a crippling fuel shortage that has forced his government to go to a 4-day work week. All took power after mass protests forced out their predecessors, promising a clean break from the old elite. And yet, as Sri Lanka is discovering, and the others might too, rupture is not replacement. Regime change is easier than transforming states, and in the subcontinent, the ancient regime never really leaves. Dissanyake's appeal lays as a clean break from the traditional politicians Sri Lankans had targeted in what they call the Aragalaya, Sinhalese for struggle, in 2022. In Bangladesh, the 15-year rule for Sheikh Hasina ended when students protesters took over the streets of Dhaka in 2024 in what came to be known as the July Uprising. And in Nepal, large-scale Gen Z protests 6 months ago were sparked by a ban on social media and coordinated on Discord. But this part of the world too often confuses toppling leaders with transforming states. Actual governance requires boring competence, regulatory reform, judicial independence, checks on the executive. In Bangladesh, Rahman's return isn't even that much of a rupture with the past. His father was a military dictator and his mother prime minister. And we're already seeing the consequences of that. Legislators from Bangladesh's Nationalist Party are refusing to participate in a process to amend the constitution and constrain executive power, as was agreed last year. Dissanayake, meanwhile, has found that cutting sleeves isn't as easy once in government, especially if you have made the mistake of blaming structural economic problems, such as Sri Lanka's chronic balance of payment problems, on corruption. The country's anti-bribery commission received just over 8,400 complaints last year. It made 84 arrests. Institutional reform, independent regulators, and depoliticized decision-making are the best antidotes to corruption. But that isn't on the agenda in Sri Lanka. The anti-corruption investigators are supposed to be independent, but government ministers regularly proclaim on their activities, and the commissioner's head has complained that the finance ministry wants to control its funding. As a consequence, Dissanayake has had to take headline-grabbing but fundamentally unjustifiable steps, like arresting a former president, Ranil.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wicked rush machine.
Yeah, and what one Indian politician described as petty charges. The new government in Nepal seems to be speed-running the same script. Barely a day after it took office, a former Prime Minister, K.P. Sharma Ali, was arrested and detained. The new cabinet, presided over by Shah in black sunglasses, has produced a 100-point agenda for its first weeks, but the chances are that it will work on vengeance and public relations first and postpone the hard graft of institutional change. This is in error. The longer the gap between revolt on the city streets and revolution is in the corridors of power, the harder it is for real change to take hold. And this has happened in South Asia before. In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi rose to power claiming to be an outsider after years of protest against a supposedly corrupt government in New Delhi. If he wanted to transform the country, as he pledged, he could have used that energy to reinvent how government works. For example, by replacing the coddled bureaucracy that independent India inherited from the British to make it more accountable. But administrative reform was way down his list of priorities, and as a consequence, his government has never quite lived up to its initial promise. Too little has changed in how the Indian state operates. The subcontinent's insurgents will realize that winning power is easy. What's hard is wielding it without becoming what they replaced. And that's from Bloomberg.
And lawmakers are pushing a bill to keep AM radio in cars. Randy Brooks will never forget the day he had to break the news live on the air to a woman that her husband had perished in a tornado. The KIXQ country music radio host had been tapped to help with 24-hour news coverage in the wake of a massive tornado that decimated Joplin, Missouri in 2011. With electricity and communication grids down, the local AM radio station was the only source of information that locals could receive for days. Members of the town, with a population of about 50,000, tuned to KIXQ from their parked cars and battery-powered radios and called the station for information on the whereabouts of their loved ones. When the wife of a local Pizza Hut employee rang the show about her missing husband, Brooks scanned the latest Red Cross list of victims and, seeing the man's name, recalled eyewitness accounts from first responders who said he died a hero. Brooks shared the story on the air of how the employee had been swept away while barring the door of a walk-in cooler, saving the lives of 10 people inside. We got to mourn with her there. I was crying, she was crying, Brooks said of the broadcast. It was like nothing I've experienced before. In hindsight, Brooks realizes the role that car radio played in spreading crucial information during the emergency cannot be taken for granted. That was just proof of the way that radio was the communication hub, he said. Today, that hub faces a lot more competition from the likes of satellite radio, streaming music, and podcasts. Automakers have long tried to eliminate AM radio capabilities from their new vehicles. But after years of tussling between the Detroit and Washington lawmakers, appear poised to pass legislation this year that would mandate automakers keep AM receivers in cars. Massachusetts Democrat Senator Evan Markey and Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz are leading this charge. Some 47 million Americans tune into AM radio every week, Markey said. He also called the airwaves an irreplaceable platform for diverse voices, including hundreds of foreign language stations serving the immigrant communities. Over the last decade, Tesla, Mazda, and Ford started to phase out AM radios in new electric vehicle models. This was mainly due to interference from equipment in electric vehicles that could create more static in the AM broadcasts, rendering them hard to hear. In 2023, Ford reversed its decision and said it would restore access to AM radios in all of its Ford and Lincoln vehicles. Dashboards have become increasingly crowded with services like mobile applications that often require a subscription and also offer an opportunity for car makers to recoup a bit more money. Then there's the public's changing media preferences and the perception that AM radio is a medium of yesteryear. Nobody under the age of 40 would know to go to AM radio in an emergency, said Shane Tews, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, focused on the digital economy. Broadcasters are holding on to an origin story that was good at the time, but it just doesn't hold now. As digital infrastructure shifts to fiber networks that are typically buried underground, consumer-grade internet becomes less likely to be disrupted by natural disasters, Tews said. Mobile networks are also more easily patched with temporary solutions like satellite, drones, or even high-altitude balloons that can beam internet to disaster areas below. These advances render radio less of a crucial emergency channel and more of a nostalgic technology backed by passionate fans, according to Tews. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation, a trade group that represents major vehicle manufacturers, has said that the mandate is really aiming at propping up a particular business model, in this case, advertising-supported analog AM broadcasting. According to broadcasters and supporters of the legislation, AM radio still wins in extreme emergencies. AM radio waves travel close to the ground and over extremely long distances. Without any interferences, the signals can travel indefinitely. FM radio, the more popular part of the dial today, requires bigger towers that are susceptible to the same destructive forces that take down cell towers and power lines.
And Fed official rate hikes could be appropriate. A top Fed Reserve official said Monday that an interest rate hike could be appropriate if inflation remains persistently above the central bank's 2% target, the latest sign that some policymakers are moving away from a bias toward reducing borrowing costs. Beth Hammack, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, said her general preference is for the Fed to keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged for quite some time. She also said the Fed might have to cut its rate if higher gas prices cause the economy to slow and unemployment to rise. But if inflation remains elevated, a rate hike could be needed, she said. I can foresee scenarios where we would need to reduce rates if the labor market deteriorates significantly, or I could see where we might need to raise rates if inflation stays persistently above our target. Hammack's comments suggest a growing concern among at least some policymakers that inflation, which was elevated before the Iran war, may require rate hikes to tame further. Rate increases by the Fed would be a sharp shift from the late last year when the central bank cut its key rate 3 times. Other Fed officials have recently opened the door to rate hikes, including Austin Goolsbee, president of the Chicago Fed, and minutes of the Fed's meeting in late January said that several of the 19 officials on the rate-setting committee supported altering the post-meeting statement to reflect the possibility of upward adjustments to rates. A rate hike would almost certainly prompt President Trump to lash out at the Fed, which he has harshly criticized for not cutting rates further. He has called for the central bank's key rate to be lower than 1%. Down from its current level of about 3.6%. The government will update 2 inflation measures this week, though only one will likely reflect the impact of the jump in gas prices since the Iran war began on the 28th of February. Gas prices averaged $4.12 a gallon nationwide Monday, according to the AAA, up 80 cents from a month earlier. On Friday, the government will issue the March inflation report, providing a first read on the impact of higher gas and energy prices. Economists forecast that annual inflation will worsen significantly, jumping to 3.1% from 2.4% in February, according to a survey by data provided FactSheet. On a monthly basis, they expect consumer prices rose 0.8% in March from February, which would be the biggest increase in almost 4 years. The Commerce Department will report the Fed's preferred inflation gauge for February on Thursday, though they won't incorporate any impact from the Iran conflict. Inflation has been running above our target for more than 5 years now, Hammack said, and a further increase would mean it's moving in the wrong direction, away from our 2% objective. Consumers may react to higher gas prices by cutting back on their spending elsewhere in the economy, Hammack said, which could lead to weaker growth and layoffs, which the Feds would need to respond with rate cuts. How the war impacts the economy will depend on how long it lasts and how long it lifts gas prices and other costs. Now in its 6th week, it has already lasted longer than she expected when the Feds last met March 17th and 18th.
Let's look at royal stars. Happy birthday for Tuesday, April 7th. You are motivated, positive, idealistic, and confident. You're enthusiastic, energetic, and helpful. Socialize and enjoy your life this year because your creativity and zest are at a pinnacle. Aries, today's you're pumped up with energy. You want to do something different because you want to expand your world. Obviously, travel would be an excellent choice. Tonight, you should learn something. Taurus, discussions about shared property, taxes, debt, and inheritance, all that red tape stuff, will take precedence today. Behind the scenes research will help you. Tonight, check your finances. Gemini, today you will have to go more than halfway when dealing with others because the moon is opposite your sign. Don't worry, 2 weeks from now, when the moon is in your sign, people will have to defer to you. Tonight, be gracious. Cancer, this is a powerful day for you because the sun makes you look great and the moon makes you want to get things done. Tonight, you have to work. Leo, it might be hard to conceal your feelings from others today, so don't even try. Just be yourself. Feel who you really are. Tonight, you get to play. Virgo, if you can relax at home today, this will please you. It will feel good to take it easy among familiar surroundings, so tonight you can relax. Libras, you have a strong urge to talk to someone today. You have something to say. Find someone who will listen to you. Tonight, an interesting discussion. Scorpio, in a curious way, you might find that your possessions seem important to you today. Tonight, check your money. Boy, everybody's checking their money. Sagittarius, the moon is in your sign today, which can make you more emotional than usual. However, this will slightly increase your good luck, which gives you an edge over all the other signs. Tonight, you are in charge, and probably buy a raffle ticket. Capricorn, like yesterday, this is a day when you prefer to be low-key. Work alone or behind the scenes. Discussions with others will be lively nevertheless. You might prefer to stay at home and enjoy your privacy tonight. Aquarius, friendships are important to you, and today your interactions with a friend or a member of the group will be meaningful. Why not bounce your dreams and hope for the future off someone in case their feedback might help you. Tonight, be friendly. Pisces, this is the second day where you will find that you are high vis. Once again, others notice you, and they seem to know personal details about your private life. Tonight, you better be modest.
And as part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. Andre V. Daup, Viola Ginger, Jason M. Medin, and Peggy J. Neal. Again, if you need further information on any of these names, please give us a call at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555.
You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, April the 7th, on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We will return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are, of course, Lori and
Lita.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. And in case you forgot, your readers are Lita
And Lord.
Yeah, we switched it up.
Yes, you did.
Trying to confuse you. And a contractor sues Severino for unpaid judgment. In Elma, construction company is battling with developer and former general contractor Samuel Severino to recoup a $500,000 judgment that Severino refutes while also saying he can't pay it. Matter Construction Company obtained a court ruling against Severino Companies in September 2024 for failing to pay Matter $527,000, almost $528,000, for work it performed as a subcontractor for Severino on construction of the new Cambria Hotel on Rainbow Boulevard in Niagara Falls. But Severino Companies hasn't paid that debt, even though the owner and developer of the project, Frank Strangios, Plati Niagara, says it paid Severino for the work. The general contracting firm was largely shut down in August of 2023 after a dispute with the state agency left it unable to get new financing or insurance. Meanwhile, Severino has been pursuing development projects separately through other corporate entities and third parties and still manages various properties. So Matter is suing Severino personally to collect. We've gone before a judge and won summary judgments against him, but he claims he has no money, former President Kevin Biddle wrote in an email to the Buffalo News. Whenever he fails, it always seems to be someone else's fault, and he looks like the victim. Matter claims it's fully performed its obligations, but Severino says there certainly is a dispute over Matter's work and services. Severino said Maduro defaulted on its contract by failing to adequately staff the project in order to get it done on time, costing Severino more money. He said he had a letter to that effect from the project architect, Philip Silvestri. Biddler denies that, saying the project was already 4 months behind schedule when Matter started on the job, and additional delays resulted from lack of detail or information. However, Plati Niagara had already approved and paid Severino for the work, and the court ordered Severino to forward that payment to Matter. Severino said he chose not to appeal the ruling, but Severino Companies LLC is not able to pay this judgment. Yet the judgment remains on the books. We haven't been working with Gross Schumann to try to get our money back. We have been working with Gross Schumann to get our money back from him in almost 3 years and win every step of the way, but somehow can't get paid, Biddle wrote. Developers and general contractors often fight with subcontractors on projects, but Severino has had a particularly challenging time since 2023 because of two projects in particular, the Cambria project in Niagara Falls and the Ellicott Station project in Batavia. In both cases, he had to walk away in 2023 after a battle with the Dormitory Authority of New York State over a state university construction project forced his company to halt operations. With the Cambria, his firm has been the general contractor on the $20 million project. The 7-story hotel with 120 rooms was part of a mixed-use project 2 blocks from Niagara Falls State Park, and also included 3 2-story, 2-unit townhouses fronting on Buffalo Avenue intended as vacation rentals. It was originally announced in September of 2019, but was delayed, first by the pandemic, then by slow construction, and finally by Severino's sudden withdrawal from the project, forcing Strangio and Plati to pick up the slack. After breaking ground in December of 2021, it finally opened in April of 2024. In Batavia, Severino was the developer behind the 2-phase residential and commercial project on Ellicott Street that was announced in 2016. Plans for a 3.3-acre site on Ellicott Street called for a 74,000 square foot, 5-story residential building with 55 affordable housing units, plus a brewery and restaurant, and an existing commercial building that would be renovated, an adjacent beer garden, and a new commercial or light industrial building on vacant land. But after getting the framing up for the residential building, Severino had to suspend work, leaving an empty and unfinished shell for the apartment building, a dated commercial building that needed to be renovated, and a large construction site. That angered officials within the city of Batavia, and especially at the Genesee County Economic Development Center, which sought to recapture tax breaks. Severino has since been able to return to that project and has largely finished the residential building, which he just agreed to sell to Pathstone Development Corporation in Rochester. He's also planning to complete work on the 2 commercial components, although he does not yet have tenants. Overall, Savarino said he has 9 projects open in September 2023 that was ultimately fully completed with all vendors paid. That includes 3 at SUNY Alfred State, 2 at SUNY Fredonia, and the Swarmsville Fire Department additions and renovations in the Olean Central School District, renovations for the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority's Metro Rail, and the first phase of the Center for Kashmir in Niagara Falls. 4 other projects for which Savarino was hired as general contractor were also completed, but by other contractors overseen by Savarino. Those included the Francis John Apartments, Frederick Douglass Towers, renovations for the Erie County Industrial Development Agency, the Buffalo Municipal Housing Authority, and Empire State Development Corporation. He is now working on the Welch Building in Westfield and F&M Building in Lockport and Ellicott Station in Batavia, with work to begin next year on number 1 Howell Street in Buffalo. But his struggles have left a trail of damage behind, with multiple liens and lawsuits on both projects. Nobody got stiffed, Savarino. Company still exists today and still has assets, Savarino said. And I'd like to say we finished what we started, although it takes a while.
Hochul targets potholes, thank goodness, in state repaving pot project. If Governor Kathy Hochul has her way, springtime will not be quite as synonymous with potholes this year. A dozen pothole-plagued Western New York locations will be among the 44,000 areas across the state to be filled and repaved this week, Hochul announced on Monday. Some 215 State Department of Transportation crews will place 2,200 tons of asphalt across almost 2,150 lane miles to remedy the road cavities following one of the coldest winters in recent memory. The plan is to fill 175,000 potholes before the end of the month and more than 1.3 million by the end of the year, Hochul said. Joined by State Department of Transportation Commissioner Marie-Therese Dominguez and State Thruway Authority Executive Director Frank Hoare. Moments earlier, Hochul joined DOT workers and helped fill a pothole at Southern Boulevard and McCarthy Avenue, and that's in Albany. I'm here to say, potholes, your days are numbered. Literally numbered, Hochul said. We're counting how many we're taking down, and I just took one down. The work comes as the state has begun construction on the final phase of a $5.1 million project along Harlem Road in the town of West Seneca, which will resurface the roadway and reconfigure lanes to include a center 2-way left turn lane. New curbs, drainage systems, and sidewalks will be installed. This will be the biggest year in state history for road paving, Hochul said. I'm here to say that we understand the pain and the frustration of drivers. Hochul, a Buffalo-born Democrat, faces re-election in November against Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman, a Republican. A Siena University poll released on March 31st showed Blakeman within 13 points of Hochul in a would-be matchup. 2 months earlier, a similar Siena poll showed Hochul up by 26 points, twice that amount. She also trailed Blakeman among independent voters by 7 points. Fixing potholes is an issue that crosses party lines. New Yorkers of all political stripes use the roads. Dominguez urged the public to drive safely and to be aware that DOT workers will be out on those roads. The bottom line is that please, 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 we got a lot of people out there, she said. State DOT workers, they're public servants. They're out there to protect you and to maintain the safe, efficient, reliable, and equitable transportation system across the state. In order to do that, the public, please recognize that they're out there. Slow down. Put your phones down. Move over and pay attention to the task at hand, which is driving. Please, please keep them safe. The priority pothole locations to be repaired include Interstate 990 in Amherst, Millersport Road, Amherst, Walden Avenue, Lancaster, Route 39 in Yorkshire, US 219, Ellicottville, Interstate 88, Ellicottville, Sherman, Poland, and North Harmony, US 20 in Westfield, Route 394 in the village of Lakewood, Paving locations in April include Interstate 86 in Great Valley, Carrollton, and Salamanca. May paving locations include Route 179 in Hamburg for 2.2 lane miles, Route 270 in Amherst for 2.5 lane miles, and Route 78 in Pendleton, Lockport, Clarence, and Amherst, which is 22.45 lane miles. There's additional road work. Boy, we're going to be in for it for a long time. The state will pave 28 line miles on Interstate 190 from Route 31 to Upper Mountain Road and from LaSalle Expressway to Williams Road in Niagara County. The state will pave 27 lane miles on Interstate 86 between exit 29, which is Friendship, and exit 30, which is Belmont, and the Friendship Rest Area in Friendship, Amity, and Angelica in Allegheny County. The state will resurface 36 lane miles of Interstate 90 in Erie County between the Thruway exit 49 to the west of exit 52. It's going to be some smooth driving when all this is done.
Oh, yeah, I hope so, because it's pretty nasty out there right now.
Yeah.
And kind of sticking with the local news, I'm going to flip over to the Workforce Expo, which is offering training and supportive services. A workforce development expo focusing on expanding access to career training, education, and supportive services for families will be held next week in downtown Buffalo. The Buffalo Prenatal Perinatal Network, in collaboration with the Buffalo Educational Opportunity Center, plans to host the Strong Families, Strong Futures Workforce Development Expo from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at April 14th at 555 Ellicott Street. The event is free and open to the public. Attendees can receive access to workforce development programs, SUNY Reconnect and college opportunities, resume writing help, and interview skills and preparation support. Among the community organizers participating, Buffalo Public Schools Adult Education Division, Fidelis Care, SUNY Erie, Western New York Women's Foundation, Northland Workforce Training Center, and RISE program of Feed More Western New York, and the Workforce Buffalo Downtown Career Center. Each organization will provide resources focused on women's economic advancement and family support services according to BPPN. Economic opportunity is one of the strongest components of family stability, BPPN CEO Luann Brown said. When parents and caregivers gain access to education, skill training, and meaningful career pathways, it doesn't just change their circumstances, it strengthens their children and our entire community. Children thrive in school when their basic needs are met. This expo is about removing barriers and building brighter futures. The expo, BPPN said, reflects a commitment to reduce employment barriers and to create attainable pathways for Buffalo families to succeed. The Buffalo Educational Opportunity Center, where the expo will be held, is focused on providing instructional programs and supportive services to those who have limited educational and financial opportunities. BPPN, a nonprofit based in the corner of East Tupper and Washington Streets, aims to empower women, fathers, and families by providing education, support, advocacy, and connections to resources in Western New York.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time, 13 minutes after the hour. No charges for 2 officers who shot and killed an OP man. State Attorney General Letitia James will not pursue criminal charges against 2 Orchard Park police officers who shot and killed a mentally disturbed man who charged at officers with a knife on August 30th in 2024. The officers shot James Cushman, age 31, outside his Hawthorne Avenue home after he ran toward them with the knife 3 times. Despite repeated warnings from the police to drop that weapon, James's office stated in a press release. The Attorney General's decision not to press charges came after an investigation of more than 19 months, which began after Cushman's death on August 30th. Under New York State's justification law, a police officer may use deadly physical force when the officer reasonably believes it to be necessary to defend against the use of deadly physical force by another, James said. In this case, Mr. Cushman was armed with a knife and charged at officers multiple times while ignoring repeated commands to drop that knife. Daniel J. Chiachia, attorney for the Cushman family, said he's disappointed but not surprised by James's decision. He noted that a wrongful death lawsuit filed by the family against police is still pending in federal court. An autopsy showed that 5 of the 7 shots that hit Cushman entered his body through his back, Chiachia told the Buffalo News on Monday. He said 2 other shots struck Cushman in the chest. I am not surprised because police officers are rarely charged criminally in this kind of case, Chiachia said. I think the facts should have been put before a grand jury. Let a grand jury decide on the charges. But this decision is far from the final chapter in this story. This case was a real tragedy, a situation involving mental health issues that, in our view, was mishandled by the police, he added. Thomas H. Burton, attorney for the 2 officers, agreed with James's decision on Monday, calling the shooting the latest tragic situation where police officers in this community had to shoot and kill someone who did not receive the mental health help that they needed. That was another failure by our mental health system, with police officers left as the last line of defense to handle it. Before shooting Cushman, the 2 officers retreated several times before he came at them with the knife, Burton said. Orchard Park Police had a long history of trying to deal with the shooting victim and his mental health problems, Burton and Police Chief Patrick Fitzgerald said after the 2024 incident. Fitzgerald said Orchard Park officers had responded to calls at the same residence one day before the fatal shooting and also about 2 weeks earlier. In addition to many other occasions, the man was repeatedly referred for mental health treatment, Burton said. This was truly a tragedy, Burton said, a situation involving a young man with mental health problems, not a hardened criminal, and 2 officers who did not want to shoot anyone when they began their work shifts that day. Police said that they went to Cushman's home on his final day after Cushman called 911, alleging that his mother was trying to kill him. I'm going out with a bang tonight, police quoted Cushman as telling 911. When they got there, police said Cushman was standing outside the home with a knife. According to Fitzgerald, officers found nothing to indicate that Cushman's mother was trying to harm him. The Attorney General's office gave the following description of the incident in announcing its decision not to file criminal charges. Mr. Cushman called 911 to report a disturbance at his house involving a gun. Mr. Cushman involved 911 that he was armed with a knife to defend himself. When the first Orchard Park officer responded to Mr. Cushman's house and got out of his patrol car, Mr. Cushman charged at the officer with a knife. The officer pulled out his service weapon and retreated toward the rear of his patrol car while repeatedly instructing Mr. Cushman to drop the knife. Mr. Cushman abruptly stopped, walked back towards his house and said, "Why didn't you do it? And you could have done it." Mr. Cushman put down the knife on top of his mailbox. A second Orchard Park officer then arrived on the scene and got out of his patrol car. Mr. Cushman grabbed the knife off the top of the mailbox and charged at both officers, who retreated behind their respective patrol cars and repeatedly directed Mr. Cushman to drop the knife. Mr. Cushman again stopped abruptly and walked back towards his home. As a third patrol car turned on the street, Mr. Cushman charged at the officers for a third time. One officer repeatedly yelled, "Drop the knife." Mr. Cushman continued to run toward the officers holding the knife and did not appear to slow down. 2 officers discharged their service weapons, striking Mr. Cushman. Mr. Cushman was transported to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. Speaking to a news reporter on Monday, Chiachia called the case a classic example of why police departments should have mental health professionals available to help them when such situations arrive. Jim Cushman was not a bad person. He was a good person with severe mental health problems. Cushman was a star football player for St. Francis High School, who later worked as a lineman for a utility company before demons took over his life for several years, the attorney said. Orchard Park Police had dealt with Cushman at least 20 times before the fatal incident. They had been at his home and talked to him the day before. An officer told him, "Jim, if you have problems again, call us. We'll help you out." James said her Office of Special Investigation, which reviews all fatal shootings by police in the state, conducted a thorough investigation in the 19 months following the shooting. State investigators reviewed crime scene evidence, nearby security camera footage, and 911 calls, interviews with involved officers and witnesses, and comprehensive legal analysis. That led to the conclusion that a prosecutor would not be able to disprove beyond a reasonable doubt at trial that the officers' actions were justified under New York law, the Attorney General's office said. At the time of the incident, Orchard Park officers were not using body-worn cameras. By June 2025, Orchard Park officers were equipped and trained in the use of the body cameras. Attorneys for Orchard Park have asked U.S. District Judge John L. Sinatra Jr. to dismiss the wrongful death lawsuit. Officers acted in self-defense when they shot Cushman, the attorneys said in asking Sinatra to dismiss. They said officers administered first aid, trying unsuccessfully to save Cushman's life. Sciacca predicted that part of the federal litigation will focus on why 5 of the 7 shots fired by the officers entered Cushman's body through his back. I believe they will argue that the shots that hit him in the chest turned his body around and caused the other shots to enter through his back, the attorney said. We would argue that he had run past the officers when they shot him in the back. Officers Tanner Till and Thomas Fowler shot Cushman, according to federal court documents. Just a sad story all along.
Yeah, it is. Over 11,000 cops urge no prison time for ex-NYPD sergeant. More than 11,000 law enforcement officers from across the globe have signed a petition asking a Bronx judge not to throw the New York Police Department sergeant convicted of killing a fleeing suspect by hurling a cooler at him in prison, the Daily News had learned. Attorneys for Sergeant Eric Duran were expected to present the signatures to Judge Guy Mitchell on Monday. Duran, who was found guilty of manslaughter in the 2023 death of a 30-year-old Eric Dupree, is scheduled to be sentenced on Thursday. The petition asks for a non-incarceration sentence, said Duran. Dupree was fleeing a drug bust in the Kingsbridge Heights section of the Bronx on the 23rd of August in 2023 when Duran lifted the cooler loaded with ice and drinks and using both hands hurled it at the suspect. Dupree, who wasn't wearing a helmet, lost control, sideswiped a tree, and was thrown off the scooter. He struck his head on the curb and landed under a parked vehicle. In the petition, officers said Duran shouldn't be punished for making a split-second decision cops are forced to make every day. The job of protecting the public from criminals is inherently dangerous and carries with it unforeseen risks. As law enforcement officers, we cannot be expected to effectively do our jobs while knowing that a good faith decision made in a rapidly evolving situation might cost us our freedom, the petition said. That possibility is worsened by the fact that the career criminals we risk our lives and safety to apprehend often never see the inside of a prison. Duran is facing between 5 and 15 years in prison. He's already been fired by the NYPD. The Dupree family has waited a long time for accountability, attorney Jonathan Roberts, who is representing Dupree's family, said in a statement to the Daily News, adding, the family asks only that the sentence reflect the gravity of what was done. The justice system is supposed to protect all New Yorkers. It should treat the loss of Eric's life with the seriousness that it deserves. An email to the state attorney general's office, which prosecuted Duran, was not immediately returned. Following the conviction in February, Roberts said the verdict validates the family's long-standing position that this tragedy stemmed from an unjustified and dangerous choice made by a police officer in a nonviolent situation. About 7,000 NYPD officers signed the petition. Other signatories include federal law enforcement cops from Chicago, Phoenix, Milwaukee, Orlando, LA, Dallas, and Atlanta. Cops from Scotland Yard and the Ottawa Police Services in Canada also signed. Before his conviction, Duran was an active cop with more than 50 illegal firearm arrests, the petition noted. Stripping him of his freedom will send a message to every single police officer throughout the country, Vincent Vallalong, the president of the New York Police Department Sergeants Benevolent Association, which put together the petition, told the Daily News. He did a fine job. He did the same thing every police officer would do in that situation. After this, every cop is going to be worried if their next decision is going to cost them their freedom. During the bench trial, prosecutors argued that using 2 hands to lift the heavy cooler showed that Duran knew how dangerous striking the suspect with the weighty object could be. Duran, for his part, testified that the cooler wasn't heavy. Duran testified that he was trying to protect other police officers when he hurled the cooler at Dupree's during a buy-and-bust operation. Cops said Dupree, a delivery driver, was buying drugs. His family claims he fled the scene because his scooter was not registered. Duran is the first NYPD officer to be taken to trial for killing a suspect since Hugh Barry was indicted for killing Deborah Danner in 2016.
Let's talk about the Bills going
Let's
to
do that.
Bradyland.
Yes.
Bills back with high hopes, new coach, and a few curse words. The Buffalo Bills begin the start of their off-season program on Tuesday. You can expect some cursing. At least that was the message from new head coach Joe Brady, who will be in front of the entire team, or at least those who show up to the voluntary sessions, for the first time in what will be an off-season full of firsts for him. Asked last week what his message to players will be, Brady joked, "I can't tell you guys that. There will probably be some cursing. I'm not going to lie. No, honestly, part of the process right now is just making sure I'm not loading them with everything day one." Speaking last week in Arizona during the NFL League meeting, Brady equated the Bills' off-season work to getting back together on the first day of high school. You were so excited for that first week of school again, and you showed up for that first class, and halfway through that first class, you're like, why the hell did I want to get back to school, right? You're just not used to it, he said. Just like these guys. They're working out, they're golfing, they're doing all their stuff, and now they're going to sit in these meetings for a day. They're going to be like, what the heck was that? What am I doing? I have to be pretty intentional and mindful. According to Article 21 of the Collective Bargaining Agreement between the NFL and the NFL Players Association, each team's official voluntary 9-week off-season program is conducted in 3 phases. Here is what is permitted in each phase. Phase 1 consists of the first 2 weeks of the program, with activities limited to meetings, strength and conditioning, and physical rehabilitation only. Phase 2 consists of the next 3 weeks of the program. On-field workouts may include individual or group instruction and drills, as well as perfect play drills, and drills and plays with offensive players lining up across from offensive players and defensive players lining up across from defensive players, conducted at a walk-through pace. No live contact or team offense versus defense drills are permitted. Then there's Phase 3, consisting of the next 4 weeks of the program. Teams may conduct a total of 10 days of organized team practice activity, or OTAs. No live contact is permitted, but 7-on-7, 9-on-7, and 11-on-11 drills are permitted. I want Phase 1 to be about the conditioning, the strength element. I don't want to assume anything, Brady told the Buffalo News last month. I don't want to assume that all of our guys are nonstop training, working hard right now. We get to spend a little time doing football. They get to understand what this program is going to look like, both with me as the head coach now, but really making sure, to me, we get 2 extra weeks of diving into our strength and conditioning program. Because Brady is a new head coach, the Bills are also entitled to conduct an additional voluntary veteran minicamp, which must happen before the NFL draft. The Bills will hold that minicamp from April 20th to 22nd, just before the first round of draft, which is April the 23rd. Because you're trying to ramp up from Phase 1, then we get that voluntary minicamp with the vets, and then to ramp it into Phase 2, you get some more time. Then when you get to the OTAs, you're not being like, man, we got to dial this back, he said. It's like, no, we only get so many of these. This has to be hard going into it because I want this to be the hardest training camp we've gone into. That's where this conditioning element is so important. It was not immediately clear, as of Monday afternoon, whether quarterback Josh Allen would be in attendance for the start of the off-season program. Allen and his wife Haley welcomed their first child last week, a daughter.
Aww.
Josh sets the tone with everything we do. Like any off-season, there's certain times of the season where it is voluntary, Brady said last week before the couple's baby was born. When you're Josh Allen, you've got marketing, you've got family. I'm understanding of guys who might not be able to get there every single day and at every moment, but what I know is, if Josh can, he will. I'm not sitting in this chair without Josh. We're in this together, and we've got to hold each other accountable. I know how important that is for him to be, especially on day one, sitting in that chair and hoping everyone else will be as well. The full dates for the Bills' entire off-season program are as follow. First day, April 7th. Voluntary minicamp, April 20 to 22. OTA off-season workouts, May 18-19, May 21, May 26 to 28, and June 1 through 4. Then there's the mandatory minicamp, which is June 9th to 11. I'm excited for it, but I have to make sure that I'm not too excited because I also have to meet them where they are at, Brady said. Go Bills.
Go Bills. And are you sick of hearing about the Sabres? Not me. Heated rivalry gets Schen's attention. Luke Schenn was in Winnipeg celebrating his daughter's 3rd birthday when he turned on the television and saw the theatrics that unfolded in the Buffalo Sabres' 8-7 win on the 8th of March against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Schenn has just been traded from the Winnipeg Jets to the Sabres 2 days earlier, and the defenseman was still waiting for visa clearance so he could come to Buffalo and join the Sabres lineup. At that birthday party in Manitoba's provincial capital, Schenn and his teammates from the Jets became transfixed by a simmering rivalry that has just reached a boil. Fights, the penalty boxes at standing room only capacity, goals upon goals upon goals. We couldn't believe what we were seeing, the 18-year NHL veteran said. That was the game of the year, and adrenaline was pumping just watching from a distance. But when you see that and see guys sticking up for one another and to see the fight, it was pretty impressive to watch. Now Schenn is in Buffalo, and he was prepared to be a part of the rematch. The Sabres are scheduled to host the Lightning at 7 p.m. Monday, which, by the way, they won, a game that many project as another Spirit affair. Schenn is known for his penalty-killing prowess and his ability to evolve over a career of nearly 2 decades and could be in the lineup in the final regular season meeting between the two teams. During Monday's morning skate at KeyBank Center, Schenn worked in a defensive pairing with Logan Stanley, who had played in 13 games since his arrival in a 4-player trade with Winnipeg, and a trade that also included Schenn. It's nice to jump into a team that has some success that last half of the year, Schenn said. As of right now, fit in and help out any way I can, but as you get going and things pick up a little bit, hopefully I'll be able to contribute a little bit more. The 6'2 defenseman from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, brings perspective and experience to the locker room. He brings a physicality that will be necessary as the Sabres were preparing for their final 5 regular season games beginning Monday and continuing into the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Sabres clinched a playoff berth for the first time since 2011 on Saturday, but they are in a stretch where they lost 5 of their last 7 games, including 3 losses in regulation. Tampa Bay began Monday atop the Atlantic Division with 102 points, 2 points ahead of the Sabres and Montreal. Schenn also brings a familiarity to the brand of hockey that defines the Lightning, a franchise that he helped earn 2 Stanley Cup championships with in 2020 and 21. I know a lot about those guys over there, well, Schenn said, and it's just part of their DNA. They bring it, whether it's Buffalo or playing against the Panthers the last couple of years, or before that, when I was there, we had some rivalries against the Islanders. Guys, stick up for one another, and when you're on the other side of that, now you don't want to be back down. Schenn hasn't played since the 14th of March when he was on a defensive pairing with Stanley and had 11 minutes of ice time, including a 1 minute 15 second of shorthanded time and a 3-2 shootout win against Toronto. We looked at him as depth for our team, Sabres coach Lindy Ruff said. He's a good penalty killer. Down low, he understands you've got to keep it simple, and he's hard around the front of our net. Stanley has skated on a pairing with Zach Metza in 7 of the last 10 games, but Metza worked on an extra defensive pairing Monday morning with Michael Kesselring. It's never easy for those guys, Ruff said. I spent plenty of time talking to Schenn and to others, and that's going to be a place time we need different pieces. I don't think that's what any player wants to hear. They want to play night in and night out, but when you have extra bodies, that's what it ends up being.
All right. Let's look at Around and About, but first, you're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time, 33 minutes after the hour. Dream acquired Reese from Sky. The Atlanta Dream acquired 2-time WNBA All-Star Angel Reese from the Chicago Sky on Monday in exchange for first-round draft picks in 2027 and 2028. Atlanta also receives the right to swap second-round picks with Chicago in 28. The 6'3" Reese averaged 14.1 points and 12.9 rebounds in her 2 seasons with Chicago, earning All-Star honors each year while finishing as the runner-up for Rookie of the Year in 2024. Reese, age 23, was the number 7 overall pick by Chicago in the 2024 WNBA draft, after leading LSU to the 2023 National Championship. The trade comes after Reese expressed frustrations late in last season's 10:34 finish for the Sky. She told the Chicago Tribune that she might have to move in a different direction and do what's best for me if the team didn't improve its outlook. She later apologized to the team for those comments. Richardson sprints to victory on a grass track. America sprint star Sha'Carri Richardson surged through the field Monday to win the Staywell Gift, an annual race contested on handicap over 120 meters on grass in Staywell, a small Australian town near Melbourne. In the 144th edition of the event, Richardson provided one of its most breathtaking finales as she started at scratch and caught the field at the 90-meter mark before pulling away for an astonishing win in just 13.15 seconds. Just make sure I'm patient that first 10 meters like my coach today told me and just executing the rest, Richardson told 7 Network television post-race. I think I realized I was going to run right past 90. The 26-year-old American, one of the fastest women of all time, is just the third woman to win the race from scratch and claimed a prize of 40,000 Australian dollars, which is about 27,500 US dollars. Richardson won a silver medal in the 100 meters in the 2024 Paris Olympics and a gold in the 4x100 relay that same year. She also claimed the 100-meter title at the 2023 World Championships. Running a red light leads to investigation. Tejal Pogacar is among the riders being investigated for running a red light at a railway crossing during the Tour de Flanders on Sunday. Pogacar, who won the race for a record-equaling third time, was in a group of riders who went through the crossing without stopping. The majority of the peloton behind them had to stop before the railway. Belgium officials confirmed Monday there is an ongoing investigation for the riders who allegedly ran that red light. They said no further details were immediately available. Local media said the riders could face a fine and a driving suspension if found guilty. Pogacar, who rides for the UAE Team Emirates XRG team, reportedly said after the race that the signal for them to stop came in too late. Race officials ordered the riders who went through to slow down so the rest of the peloton could catch up to them again. PWHL's charge coach taking indefinite leave. Ottawa charge coach Carla McLeod is taking an indefinite leave as she continues to receive treatment in her battle with breast cancer, the team announced Monday. She remains in good spirits and is focused on her health and recovery, the team said. The entire organization fully supports Carla, and her family asks that her privacy be respected. Carla first revealed being diagnosed with cancer a week into the Professional Women's Hockey League season in late November. Despite traveling to her native Alberta to receive treatments, she previously missed only one charge game and continued her duties as coach of the Czechia's national women's hockey team. At 13-11-1, including a PWHL leading 7 OT wins, the Charge have 5 games left and sit 5th in a tightly contested race for the league's 4th and final playoff berth.
And Scheffler brings new addition to Augusta, the Masters, which I believe begins on Wednesday. Two-time Masters champion Scottie Scheffler arrived at Augusta National on Sunday, and he brought the whole family with him, all 4 of them. Scheffler, who tends to keep his golf separate from his home life, had not shared any information since withdrawing from the Houston Open 2 weeks ago because of the impending birth of his second child. He said wife Meredith gave birth to a boy on the 27th of March, and they named him Remy. We just liked it, Scheffler said about the name. His first son, Bennett, was born in 2024 before the PGA Championship. We didn't have very many good boy names, to be honest with you. There he was in a stroller. Meredith was pushing under the famous oak tree by the clubhouse, 9 days old and already at his first Masters. It added to the sights rarely seen anywhere else on the Sunday before a major. That holds true with so much more about the Masters. Defending champion Rory McIlroy has been at the club all weekend watching the Augusta National Women's Amateur on Saturday and handing out trophies to a group of boys in the annual Drive, Chip and Putt National Finals on Sunday. McIlroy has talked about how much he looks forward to returning as the Masters champion and enjoying all the perks that go with it. He He was in his green jacket during the drive, chip and putt, and posed with Maria Jose Marin, the ANWA winner and first Colombian to join the roll call of Augusta National winners. Then he headed out to the golf course with his father Jerry and Augusta member Jimmy Doon. Next up is the Master Club dinner Tuesday and the elaborate menu he has put together. It is the most exclusive dinner club in all of sport, and I think we should all feel very fortunate that we are there, he told Golf Channel after his part in the trophy presentation Sunday. But we're there because of the hard work and the good play that we've been able to produce. He also mentioned two players who won't be at the dinner: Tiger Woods, arrested and briefly jailed for suspicion of driving under the influence on the 27th of March car crash, and Phil Mickelson, who is tending to a personal health matter at home. Unfortunately, there will be a couple of guys that won't be in the room, which is a shame, but I wanted to make sure that they're acknowledged as well, McIlroy said. They've been two of the greatest champions that the Masters has ever seen, but it's going to be a really cool night. I can't wait. I hope everyone enjoys the dinner and enjoys everything that I've selected. Bryson DeChambeau also was at Augusta National on Saturday for the end of the ANWA consoling asterisk tally after the 17-year-old hit two shots into Rays Creek for a quadruple bogey 7 on the par 3 12th hole that cost her a chance to win. DeChambeau grew up about 45 minutes away from where Tally lives in the Central Valley of California, and they know each other very well. Obviously, I've had difficult moments in my career, and if there's anything I can do to support her, that's what I'm here for. That's why I'm here to support, DeChambeau told reporters Saturday. He teed off Sunday by himself after the DC&P was over, walking to slap hands and pose for photos with kids and spectators some 100 yards down the right side of the tee. I've got to go play, he told them before running to catch up with his caddy. There are exceptions for running at Augusta National. Also, there was Gary Player, the three-time Masters champion, who will be hitting the honorary tee shot on Thursday. The Black Knight was on the putting green as the boys' 7 and 9 division was preparing for its putting competition on the 18th green. There was an 8-year-old, Landon Kelly from Henderson, Nevada, wrapping 40-foot putts down the hole with 90-year-old Player watching with amazement. What a touch he has, man, Player exclaimed. Scheffler took this Sunday to play with Blake Smith, his longtime manager, who has never played Augusta National. Scheffler and McIlroy are fighting some history this week. Adam Scott in 2013 is the last player to win the Masters after having 3 weeks off. I've been practicing, Scheffler said. I've been able to do a good amount at home.
And in the women's Final Four, Best Betts takes UCLA to the NCAA title. Lauren Betts forced herself to repeatedly watch last season's Final Four debacle against UConn, using the lessons learned in this year's return trip to the national semifinals. The two-time All-American did her homework following a season-low points in UCLA's only loss of the season, applying what she gleaned from the game film to help take down Texas in the rematch. Betts opened up about her mental health issues, the honesty taking a weight off her shoulders while hopefully helping others facing their own darkness. This life of hers has been a pursuit of perfection, or at least the best version of herself, and Betts capped the college basketball portion of it by reaching the pinnacle of her sport with one final dominating performance. UCLA won its first NCAA national championship with a 79-51 blowout of South Carolina on Sunday in Phoenix, and Betts, as she's been throughout her career, was the catalyst at both ends of the floor. I showed up with zero confidence, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to really play basketball for that much longer, Betts said. Coach Corey Close really believed in me and wanted to see me accomplish everything that I've ever dreamed of. They wanted me to see myself the way they all see me, and I feel like now at this point I can finally, truly do that. The 6'7" senior shook off a first-half coughing fit, the dry desert air got to her, to finish with 14 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 blocked shots. She altered and prevented even the thought of several others at the rim to give UCLA its first national championship since taking the 1978 AIAW title. She's a very dominant player, South Carolina's Tessa Johnson said. She's consistent and effective. It's hard to scout that. Betts got to share a national championship with her younger sister Sienna, a freshman on the team, along with friends and family in the stands. They were crying more than I was because they've seen me since my sophomore year. Just how I'm matured, and it has been really special for them, Betts said. They mean so much to me. The closing flourish capped a rocky at times career. Betts was the nation's #1 high school recruit out of Grandview High School in Aurora, Colorado, and she chose to play at the perennial powerhouse, Stanford. She had a solid freshman season, but the building mental health issues she had been struggling with began to bubble closer to the surface even after she transferred to UCLA. Betts opened up about her struggles last year and expounded upon it in a recent first-person story in which she detailed the brutal hospital conditions and the epiphany once she got out, the epiphany that she wanted to be here. I just feel like me, basketball, and this platform that I've been given. I was put on this earth to do more than play basketball, Betts said. I think the journey I've had, the hardships that I've went through, are to help other people. Betts dedicated herself to getting better on and off the court and became one of the nation's best college basketball players. UCLA great, a Bruin for life. Ann Myers Drysdale will always be a Bruin. The UCLA great and women's basketball pioneer smiled as she was honored with other members of the 1976 U.S. Women's Olympic basketball team at Sunday's national championship game. They all wore matching bright red Team USA shirts, but when Myers Drysdale was introduced, she waved to the crowd at Mortgage Matchup Center in Phoenix and then lifted up her red shirt to reveal a blue UCLA top, celebrating the team she won a national championship with as a player. That title was nearly 50 years ago, and the now dissolved AIAW, the postseason tournament for the women's college basketball before the NCAA took over back in 1982. But Myers Drysdale was filled with the same joy watching UCLA defeat Carolina for its first NCAA-era title on Sunday. You know, there's so much pride wearing USA across your jersey, Myers Drysdale said. And there's no question that I am once a Bruin, always a Bruin, and there's no way I was not going to wear a UCLA shirt under my USA shirt, just to show the fans that all of us are so supportive of this team. Myers Drysdale was the first woman to receive a full athletic scholarship at UCLA and helped the Bruins beat Maryland in the 1978 AIAW National Championship. UCLA is ranked #1 in the AP poll. UCLA finished the season at '1 in the Associated Press Women's Basketball Top 25 on Monday after routing South Carolina to win its first NCAA championship. The Bruins were a unanimous choice from the 31-member national media panel, ending the season as the top choice for the first time in school history. Their first #1 ranking came after they beat South Carolina in November of 2024. The Gamecocks were second behind the Bruins, with Final Four participants UConn and Texas third and fourth, respectively. The Huskies, who have finished in the top 10 of the final poll for 33 straight years, had been the #1 team all season until Monday. They had been unbeaten until a loss to South Carolina on Friday.
And let's move over to asking Eric. Dear Eric, I guess I'm tired of reading all the problems people have with their marriages or children or coworkers. Here's my problem. None. How do I stay engaged, feel completely fulfilled, and happy with my life? Signed, Happy Life. Dear Life, my answer is going to sound simple maybe, but I found it to be one of the most complex practices in my life. Gratitude. Let's start with the first part of your letter. You get tired of reading about other people's problems. Not for nothing, but that's kind of the bread and butter of an advice column. However, instead of feeling fatigue when you flip the page of your newspaper, perhaps consider other people's problems with empathy, which can trigger gratitude that their problems aren't what you're facing or that you've made it to the other side of a similar situation. I also find that reading about other people's challenges make me think about life in a different, more expansive way. Another thing for which to be grateful. Gratitude will also help you stay engaged in your own life. It is imperative that you not take your life for granted. Happiness is a gift, and it's important that you recognize it, that you honor it, and that you thank it. You can express gratitude to the people who improve your life, to a higher power, if you believe in one, and to yourself. Don't let one happy day go by without stopping to realize that happiness is not a given. When you go to bed and when you wake up, make a list of what you're grateful for, what you're looking forward to, and what's making you happy. That's how you stay engaged with your own life, and that's how you build an emotional fortitude that will help you navigate problems when they come. Dear Eric, I would like to add another perspective to your response to Tired of Being Fixed, who often received unsolicited medical advice from a friend. While unsolicited advice is generally unwelcome and not necessary when sharing difficulties, worrying, or problems with anyone, it is reasonable to expect a response. The sharer has no control over that response, which is indeed often more than just support. However, the sharer can control their own response and decide to ignore any advice given. It seems reasonable to me that any person hearing a friend's concerns will offer their take on things. This does not mean the sharer needs to accept the listener's response. Just my opinion. Signed, You Talk, I Talk Back. Dear Talkback, I think this is a fair take. Part of conversation is response. Most of the time when we share things in conversation, we're hoping that the person we're talking to will have some opinion or reflection on what we've shared. It's impossible that the friendship described in the letter involves one party sharing a lot of medical issues, that the other party thinks that the unsolicited advice is the only way to engage. Your letter reminds me of a question I find enormously helpful in all kinds of relationships. Are you looking for advice, or do you simply need to be heard? There's a very clear distinction between the two. Sometimes we just need to get our thoughts out. That said, getting one's thoughts out isn't always something a friend or loved one can handle at the moment. It's important to know our audience and to manage expectations on all sides. Dear Eric, I just read about the son who is trying to help his 98-year-old father with dementia, and that father's friends have stopped visiting, caring for Dad. My husband and I aren't that old yet, but we have lost our parents and several other siblings and close friends. My husband has a gift for these people when they are dying, and sometimes not in the present. He talks about the past, the things that they have shared together, interests, anything to get their mind to where they used to be, even if the stories have changed. Maybe caring for Dad can have his father's friends try this, just like the old times. I think sometimes it's difficult when we don't know what to say when someone isn't in the moment. Signed, Good Memories. Dear Memories, this is a lovely suggestion, and it could be very helpful to the letter writer and others. Sometimes when friends or loved ones experience medical challenges that change the way they operate in the world, or even change their level of cognitive ability, it can be hard to adjust. Walking down memory lane with the person whose short-term memory is failing can be a good way to recognize the present while appreciating the past for what it gave you.
And that works really well with photo albums as well, as you walk through.
Yes.
Hollywood Studios screenwriters reach a deal. Los Angeles, the Screenwriters Union and Hollywood Studios reached a surprise 4-year tentative agreement after roughly 3 weeks of negotiation. The Writers Guild of America West said on X that its negotiating committee unanimously approved a tentative agreement with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which represents studios. The Alliance confirmed the deal in a separate statement on its website Saturday. We look forward to building on this progress as we continue working toward agreements that support long-term industry stability, read the Alliance statement. The precise terms of the deals were not immediately announced, but it is expected to include several writers' priorities, such as better health care plans and more protections against artificial intelligence. The union said on X that the deal protects the writers' health plan, builds on gains from 2023, and helps address free work challenges. The contract agreement, a year longer than a typical 3-year deal, must be approved by the Guild's board members before it is ratified. The surprise agreement came within weeks of negotiation, a stark contrast to the contentious contract negotiation 3 years ago, when Hollywood writers went on a historic strike that partially brought the industry to a standstill. The screenwriters voted almost unanimously to approve that agreement, which provided them with more compensation, length of employment, and control of artificial intelligence. The current contract was set to expire in May. The studios were also working on new deals with union leaders representing actors and directors whose contracts are set to expire at the end of June. The writers' tentative deal with the studios came as the Writers Guild of America West faces an ongoing strike by its own staff that started in February. More than 100 people working in legal events and residuals departments went on strike over allegations of unfair labor practice, according to the Los Angeles Times. It is not clear how or whether the week-long strike would have an impact on the tentative deal with the studios. The union announced last month it canceled its annual award ceremony because of the staff union strike. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News. For today, it is Tuesday, April the 7th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m., and we rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been Lori and
Lita.
Thank you so much for listening, and have a great rest of your day.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio Reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the supermarket ads. At noon, we have today's USA Today. Stay with us for these readings and more. vision or have another print disability